Every day, millions and millions of dollars are won or lost with the signing of a contract, the selling or buying of a company. And these big businesses use the money of average Americans or average citizens of their country, their pensions, their savings, and they use this money like monopoly dollars. But they receive tax cut after tax cut after tax cut, and they receive more money and more money and more money off of the basis in the school of thought called trickle-down economics. Now this is saying that having more wealth at the top, more money at the top, will eventually trickle down. Now, why am I interested in this? It's because my family lives and dies by the tax policy of each administration. And so it has been my goal to understand and learn each economic system that could be used or has been used in history from a socialist or even a communist or even a capitalist standpoint. My goal is to learn each of them, to see how they can be best used. And as a result, I would like to share my knowledge and inform you with one of these economic systems, which is called trickle-down economics. But more specific name is supply-side economics. Now, supply-side economics is defined by by Britannia's Encyclopedia. This theory that focuses on influencing the supply of labor and goods using tax cuts and benefits as incentives to work and produce goods. It was expounded by U.S. economist Arthur Laffer and implemented by President Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. Supporters claim to the high economic growth during the 1980s, while their detractors claim to the massive debt it ensued and the speculation that it needed to have growth. Now, that's a basic definition, and that's the most complex you'll get. It's basically saying, to break it down, is that there will be more money at the top, in which these big billionaires and the smartest people in the industries will invest it in smaller corporations, and so it'll eventually make its way down to the bottom with the working poor and the middle class. Now, I'm here to show this speech is dedicated to informing you on the failures/downsides of these economic policies. But I can talk to you about definitions all day long. Let's move to the more substance portion of the failures of trickle-down economics, or supply-side economics. The first failure is that wealth accumulates at the top. A system is designed by nature to have wealth at the top and then trickle down as time goes on. But the system is naturally flawed, and so wealth will stay at the top. So according to The Guardian in 2017, which supports this claim, Gosen claims that the money has gone to a small group of wealthy Kansases, while the state's budget has been left with roughly $1 billion shortfall in its school system. Once its crown jewel has suffered year after year of cuts and its savings are gone. The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center calculates Trump's tax plan would cost $6.2 trillion over the first decade. Now, what does that mean? Kansas, the state of Kansas, implemented supply-side economics into its economic policy and its tax policy. And so as a result, all the money that would have been collected by the government in order to pay for these, the crown jewel of what used to be the public education system of Kansas, is now $8 billion in debt, $1 billion short of reaching their goal. And so what is shown here is a perfect example of this happening, right? So if you look here, as taxes decrease, right, the income at the top increases, right? The amount of money people are keeping are increasing. And so via what's supposed to happen, it's supposed to decrease into the lower poor, the poor right here. But however, this wall right here, that's called greed. And so people are keeping the money. And this is a downside of the system which is supposed to help foster economic growth by putting wealth and tax cuts in the hands of billionaires and millionaires and companies in order for them to spend money, which will help the working. But as Goose claims, these millionaires and billionaires will hold and hoard the money because humans by nature will look out for themselves and try to keep the money instead of taking risky financial moves. And so the whole notion of the system fails for the people who need the money the most. And if you just look at what's happening in Kansas, the system is failing for the kids of Kansas. Excuse me. Now that's just one aspect of the failure. Let's move to the second aspect, which hurts the GDP. Now, one of the promises that trickle-down economics brings to the table is the notion that the quote-unquote smartest people in the world will have the money to spend on companies and businesses and spend it into the economy. Now, the GDP of a country is how much money the country makes each year. And so logically, it makes sense that a country would like to make more money each year. But supply-side economics, or trickle-down economics, does quite the opposite of that. According to the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, a organization which helps regulates and helps foster trade on a global scale, says this. In its report authored by 5 economists, it argues that an increasing economic share of the poor and middle class actually increases growth, while a rising income share of the top 20% will result in lower growth. That is when the rich gets richer, benefits do not trickle down. The IMF's fight against income inequality revolves around the fact that the expenditures of the middle to lower income sectors are the drivers of the economy. Even a mere 1% in wealth for 20% of low-income earners yields a 0.38% in growth in domestic policy. On the other hand, increasing the income of the top 20% high-income earners results in negative 0.08% in growth in GDP. Now, these might seem like small numbers to you, but that can result in billions for the local economies or our country's economy. Because when you're talking about the United States, who has a $1 trillion economy, 0.3% is millions of dollars. And this can be best shown right in my second graph, right? As what's planned here is that the taxes will decrease, and so GDP will go up, right? More money will be in the economy, will be in the richest people's hands. They'll spend it on companies, which will bring in trade for the United States, for example. But what happens is the same thing that you saw happen here. It decreased. So as taxes decreased for the richest people, so the GDP decreased with a negative 0.8% growth in GDP. Now, these are a lot of numbers being thrown at you. But I think the biggest number we can explain to is how much in debt this will cause a country, which is the final failure of trickle-down economics. A trickle-down main focus is lowering taxes of the richest people in the country. And when the majority of the government comes from these rich people, when the majority of the government's money comes from these rich people and the amount of money lowered, and when that amount of money is lowered, that means the government will not have enough to do the programs that they want to do. And that's why schools in Kansas had to shut down early, because of the simple fact that they couldn't afford to keep the lights on. According to Brown's Political Review, in November of 2019, the results of the so-called Reaganomics experts, which were mixed with laissez-faire policies, which is another situation, overcame the existing recession but caused a national debt decrease to skyrocket from under $1 trillion in 1988 to roughly $2.9 trillion by 1989. In 2001 and 2003, trickle-down theory was once again thrust to the forefront of economic policy, making it with the enactment of tax cuts under the Bush administration. The assured across-the-board benefits of tax cuts never panned out, yielding underwhelming employment growth, worsened poverty levels, and the exacerbated income inequality in the lead-up to a recession that would come to devastate the American middle and lower classes. And finally, to show you on my final graph here, is what's supposed to happen, right? So as the taxes decrease over time, the amount of money the government has to spend. But the government wants to keep the amount of programs they want. So as time goes on, the debt increases. And as debt increases, debt is not needed. And this is obviously a downside, because debt will always have a long-term effect on the economy. And makes all these tax cuts that are supposed to help the economy will actually hurt it and hurt people who it's supposed to help. Which just shows all the downsides of this program, which is supposed to help the country as a whole. Now, in conclusion, overall, trickle-down economics has been a policy that politician after politician has tried to force down our throats, but it makes us hurt in the long term because of what I've just spent the few minutes trying to explain. There are some serious downsides when it comes to economic policies like income inequality, the increasing debt, and the decrease in the amount of money our country makes each year. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and this speech on the downsides of trickle-down economics, and I hope you will be leaving with this speech with more information than you arrived. Thank you.